Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. The introduction. In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, nestled between sprawling green fields and dense thickets, the air hummed with an unsettling calm. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting elongated shadows that danced upon the cracked pavement of Maple Street. It was a typical Thursday evening in late October, with leaves swirling down like confetti in the brisk wind. Yet within this seemingly peaceful enclave, whispers of dread began to stir. At the far end of Maple Street stood the old Whitmore house, a once vibrant home, now shrouded in neglect. Paint peeled from its wooden frame, and weeds encroached upon the flower beds that had once bloomed with color. Neighbors avoided the place, passing it with a reverence usually reserved for graveyards. It was a relic of mystery, sheltering secrets buried deep within its walls. On this night, the stillness shattered as the piercing wail of sirens sliced through the evening air. A neighbor had summoned the police, her intuition honed sharp by years of living in Oak Ridge. Something was amiss. As officers arrived, their car doors slamming in the gathering darkness, shadows fell over the Whitmore Housea place, once filled with laughter, now foreboding silence. Inside, the scene was harrowing. A warm meal lay abandoned on the dining table, plates still set, and a forgotten television flickered in the background, casting a ghostly glow on dust-laden furniture. In the chaos of the modern world outside, this home had become a grim tableau that would soon unveil a chilling tale of betrayal, loss, and the desperate quest for truth. The forensic team began their work, meticulously gathering evidence as something insidious lurked just beneath the surface, begging to be uncovered. Someone knew what had happened in the Whitmore house, and with every tick of the clock, the sense of urgency grew before the darkness consumed any more lives. The victim. As the investigators meticulously combed through the Whitmore residence, it became painfully evident that the sense of chaos was not merely a reflection of disarray, but a haunting indicator of violence that had transpired within these walls. At the center of it all lay Emily Whitmore, a 32-year-old schoolteacher known as a beacon of warmth in her tight-knit community. Her passion for nurturing young minds had permeated Oak Ridge, and now, in stark contrast to the light she exuded, she was found lifeless, crumpled on the floor of her living room. Emily's heart, once full of laughter, had been silenced. The police noted the signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, a shattered vase of roses, her favorite flower, now reduced to a scattering of petals across the hardwood. The living room, her sanctuary, now bore the weight of grief. Friends described her as spirited and unassumingly brave, a woman who had dedicated her life to creating safe spaces for children and uplifting her community. Her neighbors often took comfort in her presence, whether she was leading after-school programs or organizing charity events. Beneath her gentle demeanor, however, lay a woman grappling with her own battles unbeknownst to those around her. Emily had endured the recent anguish of heartbreak, her cherished relationship ending in silence and unspoken regret. As forensics continued their work, investigators were struck by the chilling ambience that clung to the air. They noted how the warmth of the home had now turned cold, the fragrant aroma of an untouched dinner dissipating into an unsettling void. With each passing moment, the weight of a town's sorrow enveloped them. For the threads of Emily's story wove through the lives of many. What darker forces could have intruded upon her world? A tight-knit community was left to grapple with the questions that loomed large. Who had taken her life? And why was it that the very walls meant to protect her had become a prison of despair? The hunt for answers had begun, spurred on by the flickering memories of a woman who touched so many lives, now a victim of fate's cruel turn. The crime scene. As detectives moved deeper into the investigation, the Whitmore home revealed an unsettling narrative of its final moments before tragedy struck. The living room, now marked by the evidence of violence, became the focal point of the scene. A meticulous examination unfolded, each detail examined under sterile lights. Outside, the distant sounds of Oak Ridge, children laughing and cars humming down quiet streets, felt surreal against the gravity of what had transpired within. The forensic team worked with precision, marking key points on their grid with small numbered tags. Emily lay at the center of this intricate web, surrounded by shards of broken glass and an overturned armchair. A slight scuff on the wall, faintest trace of an altercation, seemed to tell a story of someone having fought desperately for respite. A blood-stained handkerchief found near the couch would later be analyzed for DNA, hinting at the potential presence of another amidst the chaos. Detectives Barnett and Weathers were careful with their movements, conscious not to disturb any evidence, their conversation quiet and focused. "This looks personal," Barnett noted, scrutinizing the scattered belongings. Objects within the house were not strewn randomly. They had a purpose, as if revealing a struggle that had unfolded amidst emotional turbulence. As the two men conducted interviews with nearby neighbors, a stark reality emerged. Emily's life had intersected with myriad relationships, some filled with affection, others steeped in conflict. The kitchen held remnants of Emily's last meal, and the uneaten plate of spaghetti, noodles twisted and cooled, and a bottle of red wine, the cork lying haphazardly on the counter. Moments before her death, the mundane had transformed into a tapestry of routines, a home-cooked dinner now cloaked in tragedy. As evening edged into night, the lingering scent of the outdoors clashed with the sterilizing odor of evidence collection. With each item cataloged and each statement taken, the detectives were building a timeline that would illuminate the last hours of Emily Whitmore's life. Each piece of the puzzle was a reflection of who she was, a beloved educator, yet the answers were cloaked in ambiguity, scraping against the edges of a community unprepared for the shadows now lurking within its heart. The calm of Oak Ridge had been shattered, and with it, the search for truth pushed resolutely forward. The early investigation. With the initial shock of Emily Whitmore's murder still rippling through Oak Ridge, the assigned detectives plunged into a rapidly evolving investigation. Each lead was critical. Every piece of information held the potential to unlock the mysteries surrounding her death. Back at the station, stacks of notes and witness statements filled desks, forming a chaotic but necessary tableau of the early inquiry. Detective Barnett spearheaded the questioning of those closest to Emily, beginning with her fellow teachers at Oak Ridge Elementary. Their anecdotes revealed a mosaic of a life picked apart by professional joys and personal heartache. "She was devoted," recalled Jane Morrison, a close friend, her voice tremulous with grief. "But lately, you could see she was struggling. Her relationship with Mike ended a few months ago, and she was trying to move on. But did she ever mention feeling threatened? Barnett interjected, tapping his notepad as the atmosphere thickened with the weight of unspoken fears. Jane hesitated, her gaze dropping. Not directly, but I sensed something, like she had a heaviness she carried with her. As interviews progressed, both Barnett and Weathers discovered murmurs of a former student with a troubled background who had returned to Oak Ridge after years away, a name that resonated with unease through the hallways of the school. Jake Sutherland. A whisper echoed from the shadows of a colleague. He had a rough home life and was always in trouble. Emily tried to help him, but things spiraled. With Jake Sutherland's name now etched into their investigation notes, the detectives turned their focus. Running a background check revealed a history of minor offenses and recent concerning behavior and arrest for petty theft. Just weeks before, they wondered, could the loyal teacher's attempts to guide this boy have crossed an unseen line that triggered his wrath? Each revelation, though a thread in the broader tapestry, further constricted the noose of uncertainty that wrapped around Emily's untimely fate. As Barnett and Weathers delved deeper, they recognized that emotions ran high in the community. Not only had they been shocked by the crime, they needed clarity. Understanding Jake's story required the unease of facing long-buried scars, yet the truth seemed just out of reach, casting long shadows over the quest for justice. The dead ends. As the initial excitement of leads began to dwindle, frustration quietly seeped into the investigation. Detective Barnett and Weathers found themselves entrenched in a cycle of dead ends. The fervor that once fueled their queries now shifted into a bleak routine, marked by recurring themes of heartbreak and loss, scant evidence leading them closer to a resolution. The focal point shifted to Jake Sutherland, but even as they dug deeper, the trail grew cold. Witnesses who had seen the troubled young man mentioned he harbored a morose fascination for the dark corners of life, but none had seen him around the Whitmore house on that fatal evening. He was, after all, merely a ghost in Oak Ridge, existing on the outskirts, shunned by peers and watched by wary parents. Barnett and Weathers began to recognize that even a strong suspicion, devoid of tangible proof, was insufficient to move the needle forward. Conversational echoes from the bustling school, filled with lively children and muted whispers among staff, painted a kaleidoscope of Emily's impact, but failed to coalesce into usable evidence. Key witnesses who had initially claimed they knew Emily deeply began to recede into ambiguity. "I was never really close to her," a fellow teacher backtracked during a follow-up questioning. "I didn't even notice anything unusual." Barnett could feel the frustration simmer within him. Those already caught in the fragile existence of small-town life had become tied by the unseen threads of reluctance to share entire truths. In seeking additional leads, the detectives explored Emily's social media accounts, only to find a curated facade of joy, devoid of any visible sorrow. The digital realm, typically a trove of clues, revealed little of the emotional lives lurking beneath her public persona. People publicly praised her teaching, lauding her kindness, yet any hint of inner turmoil lay concealed behind a curtain of positive posts. As days turned into weeks, the relentless pursuit of justice felt like a game of chess against an unseen opponent. The fog deepened around their investigation as they chased shadows illuminated by fleeting moments of emotion. Barnett and Weathers knew that answers were hidden somewhere. But with each turn, the door seemed to close just a bit tighter. The notion of a clear suspect receded as if the walls of Oak Ridge themselves had conspired to guard the truth, leaving the detectives grappling at the edges of a puzzle whose pieces stubbornly resisted fitting together. Each dead end deepened the resolve within their veins, igniting the belief that within the silence, the echoes of accountability awaited discovery. A break in the case. After weeks of meticulously gathering fragments of information and navigating the labyrinthine alleys of Oak Ridge's psyche, a breakthrough washed ashore like driftwood on a foggy beach. It arrived quietly, an unassuming tip from a resident who had chosen to remain in the shadows, her voice trembling as she relayed the details. "I think I saw something strange the night Emily was killed," she said, her words layered with anxiety. "It was just after dark. A man stood near her house lurking around. I thought he was just a neighbor, or maybe up to no good." The detective's interest peaked. Barnett and Weathers immediately requested a meeting with her. They learned that she had been walking her dog when she spotted the shadowy figure just across the street from the Whitmore home. "I couldn't see his face well, but he had dark hair, and I swear I saw him arguing with someone who looked like Emily in the yard," she recounted, fear etched on her features. This new information spun the investigation into a new direction. The clarity of a potential witness lit a path illuminated by possibility. They began to piece together timelines, searching for any connection between the figure the witness described and the people who had been close to Emily. Their investigation team revisited Jake Sutherland and conducted a deeper probe into his whereabouts. It soon emerged that Jake was taken in for questioning shortly after Emily's murder, not for the killing itself, but for an unrelated incident involving petty theft. He had been brazen then, displaying defiance during his arrest that had sullied his reputation, leaving many in town wary and suspicious. But what if his rebellious streak intersected with a deeper undercurrent of unresolved tension between him and Emily? Meanwhile, forensic evidence from the crime scene began yielding unexpected results. The previously collected blood-stained handkerchief was found to carry the DNA of not just one, but two individuals. One could possibly belong to Emily, while the other was an unknown Malian indicator that someone had been in her home, developing a connection with her. The piece of evidence sparked fresh urgency within the case. As Barnett reviewed the witness's statement, combined with the forensic findings, the layers of the investigation began to peel back. A tenacious resolve replaced the skepticism that had filled their recent weeks. The shadows shrouding Oak Ridge were shifting, revealing glimpses of those lurking just out of sight. The detectives now stood on the precipice of truth, grappling with the notion that every thread they followed would soon entwine, pointing them closer to the heart of Emily Whitmore's tragic demise. The suspect, with new evidence guiding them. Detective Barnett and Weathers honed their focus on a suspect eclipsed by a veil of town gossip and nervous laughter, Jake Sutherland. The more they investigated, the more complex his narrative became. He wasn't simply a troubled youth defined by his past. He was a vessel of tangled emotions, layer upon layer of resentment and reliance clinging tightly to his shoulders. Equipped with the recent witness statement and forensic evidence, Barnett approached Jake's mother, Janet Sutherland, at the modest, slightly decrepit house that had been the backdrop of her son's formative years. The exterior bore the stains of neglect, much like Jake's own life, a crumbling facade, hiding a history of chaos. Janet's eyes portrayed deep worry as she invited them inside, hands fidgeting as they spoke. "Jake hasn't been the same since he got into trouble," she said, her voice trembling. "He's had a tough life, but he loved Emily. She tried to help him. And I think deep down, he wanted to please her." Barnett noted the way she hesitated on the words loved and help, both echoes of a fractured relationship. As the detectives probed further, it became clear that Jake had woven intricate stories about his connection with Emily. She had been a mentor, a guiding light in the gray drudgery of his home life, and yet he also felt sidelined and misunderstood. Barnett recognized those emotional pangs lurking beneath the surface. If they weren't rooted in malice, they could easily become twisted in a moment of rage. Days later, Barnett and Weathers arranged a direct confrontation with Jake. They found him hanging around a local convenience store, his hands buried in the pockets of a frayed hoodie, eyes darting as he spotted the detectives approaching. Initially bold, Jake's bravado crumbled upon their arrival. He stuttered in his denials when pressed about the evening Emily was murdered, his voice a fragile thread as he recounted his whereabouts. The trembling of his hands and the furtive glances belied a more profound, conflicted, churning fear of the consequences as the daylight crept closer. "Why did you really come back to Oak Ridge, Jake?" Barnett inquired, his tone earnest yet probing. "Everyone deserves a second chance," Jake replied, but a flicker of guilt crossed his face, swiftly masked by anger. "I don't owe anyone anything." With each question, the tension in the air thickened, an invisible web closing in on him. Although Jake maintained his innocence about Emily's death, the shoe was beginning to pinch. The edges of truth were pressing against deception. Barnett sensed that the layers of emotion and frustration in Jake could unravel swiftly. Uncertainty lingered, but with the pieces of the puzzle inching closer, one thing was certain. In their relentless pursuit of justice for Emily, they would need to untangle this boy's complex web and expose whatever darkness hid within. The trial, as the season changed, the days leading to the trial of Jake Sutherland stretched out like a tangled thread in the community fabric of Oak Ridge. Following the mounting evidence, including Jake's DNA found on the handkerchief and the chilling account from a witness, the young man stood accused of Emily Whitmore's murder. The courtroom buzzed with an electric tension, emotions hanging thick in the air as townspeople gathered to witness justice unfold. Inside the small, sunlit courthouse, the atmosphere felt heavy, charged with anticipation. Friends and colleagues of Emily filled the pews, their faces etched with the memories of her laughter now contrasted by sorrow. Barnett and Weathers took their places, conscious of the weight of their duties. They had spent countless hours revisiting evidence, reviewing witness statements, and preparing their case. But they knew that to present it effectively required a delicate balance of facts and emotional resonance. The prosecution painted a vivid narrative, recounting the evening of Emily's death with meticulous detail. They wove in the testimony from the young woman who had witnessed a shadowy figure arguing with her just moments before tragedy struck. An emotional outpour rose from her voice as she described the conflict and the sense of foreboding she had felt that night, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. As the defense attorney, however, sought to dismantle the prosecution's case, they emphasized the circumstantial nature of the evidence. There's no recorded motive, no direct evidence linking Jake to this heinous act. the attorney argued passionately. They worked to elicit sympathy from the jury for a young man with a troubled past, a victim in his own right, struggling to find his place in a world that had long abandoned him. With each witness called to the stand, the tension escalated. Barnett scrutinized Jake as if searching for the pieces of truth hidden behind his facade. The trial quickly became a reflection of Emily's life and the community's collective grief, evoking memories of her spirit crushed beneath layers of violence and heartbreak. Yet, as the final arguments drew near, the detectives felt the tempest of emotions reach a fever pitch. The courtroom echoed with whispers, emotional exchanges igniting the air. Barnett made eye contact with Jake, who anxiously fidgeted as he awaited the verdict, and saw a flicker of terror, raw and unmasked. Beneath the bravado and denials lay an undeniable truth, an all-consuming fear of the reality lurking just beyond the gavel's impending fall. In a moment marked by profound silence, the jury emerged. The weight of the community was borne on their collective shoulders as the foreperson's voice shattered the quiet with the declaration of the verdict. Whether guilt or exoneration, one truth remained: Emily Whitmore's memory echoed through each person present, forever entwined with the memories of love, loss, and the sacrifice of a life cut tragically short. The answers they sought had arrived. But what meaning would the past hold going forward? The aftermath. In the wake of the verdict, Oak Ridge settled into a heavy silence, a pall lingering like the remnants of a storm long past. The town, once filled with laughter and camaraderie, could hardly muster its former vibrancy, as the realities of Emily Whitmore's murder sandwiched between whispered conversations and shared grief. The trial had exposed the city's wounds, revealing a raw desperation to heal amidst the scattered pieces. Jake Sutherland was found guilty of second-degree murder. But the conviction, while a semblance of justice, felt hollow to many. The courtroom erupted into a storm of mixed emotions. A wave of relief washed over Emily's family and friends, yet it was tainted by a deep-seated sorrow. Relief for justice was as fragile as the memories of their beloved teacher. In the weeks that followed, Barnett and Weathers watched as their once bustling community drifted into introspection. Emily's students gathered in candlelight vigils, illuminating darkened streets as they remembered the gentle hands that had guided them, the lessons that reached beyond textbooks, and a kindness that filled their hearts. Those who had once brushed past the Whitmore house now paused reverently in reflection, drawing comfort among the flickering flames. Justice had been served, but what of the question of redemption? Jake Sutherland, once animated by youthful dreams and aspirations, saw his future slip away, lost to a dark moment, reflective of a cycle that had entwined him in despair. Barnett found himself relentless in thought, grappling with the notion that understanding Jake could yield insights into the turmoil driving youth towards destructive paths. The town mirrored that struggle. While they sought healing, they held tightly to fear of what lay beneath their veneer of safety. Amidst the healing, there arose a sense of urgency for community dialogue. Town meetings thick with confrontation fostered connections aimed at confronting the shadows that claimed Jake and others like him. Social programs aimed at mentorship and support sprang forth as citizens sought not just to remember Emily, but to embody her spirit of compassion. The local school board expanded mental health resources, forging a commitment to the idea that everyone deserved a chance. As the leaves turned to gold and crimson, Barnett sat at his desk, reflecting on the complexities of choice and consequence. The glimpse of hope rekindled amid the ashes signaled a shift in Oak Ridge, though the wounds of memory would remain. The teachings of Emily Whitmore continued to resonate through her community as they forged a collective determination to lift one another, prevent future tragedies, and honor the light that had been extinguished far too soon. Standing on the threshold of a new season, the threads of grief intertwined with growth, weaving a narrative of resilience against an unpredictable and unforgiving world. Reflection. As time slipped steadily away from the tragedy that once reverberated through Oak Ridge, the echoes began to soften, though they would never fade entirely. Detective Barnett found himself reflecting more deeply on the complexities of humanity, the intertwining paths of love and hate, dreams and despair, and the fragile moments that can spiral into irreversible consequences. The investigation had unearthed layers of emotion that transcended the confines of an ordinary murder case, revealing a community grappling not just with loss, but with the raw fabric of their shared existence. He often strolled past the Whitmore residence, now a site of memorials adorned with flowers and notes from students and townsfolk alike. Emily's spirit lingered there, her life a poignant reminder of the impact one individual can have. It offered Barnett solace, knowing that from the darkness of her death emerged a renewed commitment among neighbors to support and uplift one another, a bond forged in light against a backdrop of shadows. Even as Jake faced his fate behind bars, Barnett found himself wrestling with forgiveness and understanding, pondering whether redemption could exist even in the aftermath of such tragedy. He realized that the collective response to violence could either breed continued cycles of pain or sow seeds of hope and resilience. In Oak Ridge, they chose the latter. The community's metamorphosis was palpable idyllic changes rooted in empathy, with schools emphasizing mental health and connection. Barnett understood that true growth came not from forgetting the painful past, but from embracing it and learning together. As Oak Ridge strove to capture the spirit of Emily, they transformed grief into lasting legacy, proving that even the heaviest burdens could guide their hearts toward healing.